I started off this build with 24-inch by 12-inch aluminum plate, about 1/8 of an inch thick. It wasn't quite wide enough for the CNC, so I had to cut down one small piece. I started with that first because if I was going to screw something up, I wanted to start there. I pushed the T-track all the way up to one side and used a tape measure to measure the distance between the edge of the last T-track and the edge of the 4040. I took that measurement and I divided it by the number of spaces I would have between each of my 8 slats of T-track, and that gave me the thickness of each board I would have to cut to put in between all of the T-track. I took some cardboard and ripped it on the table saw to make sure that the distances would work. The next thing I worked on was finding the locations of the tapped holes in the base of the CNC. I took a few sheets of paper and taped them together and then used a pencil to highlight where all the holes were. From there, I took a punch and I marked each of the holes that I was going to use. At first I was going to do all the holes, but then decided just to do 4 on each of the aluminum plates. I worked on this small one first to make sure that everything was working and it was lining up as I went back and forth to the drill press to make sure that the holes were going to drill through and be aligned correctly. This is probably the most nerve-wracking thing I've done because I am a woodworker. I work with wood. If I screw up, I know how to fix it. This is metal, aluminum. If I mess something up and I don't get things aligned right, there's no turning back. I did use a countersink bit on each of the holes to make sure that the bolts will sink all the way down in and not interfere with the wood and the spoil board as I place it on top. Almost perfect. I had to slim one down just a little bit to make sure it fit. Next up, I'm using an overhead marker to mark all of the holes in the T-track so I have an idea of where they're going to be. I wasn't quite sure how exactly I was going to do this and get all the holes in the aluminum. I wanted to do it by hand, but wasn't sure if that was going to work. I also didn't have the correct bit size to use for the bolts that I have. I am using an M4 and I didn't have the correct size, but I did have a smaller bit in the CNC and decided to try to use the CNC itself to drill all the holes. I use the calipers to measure the space between the holes in the T-track so I can move the CNC more quickly. It was about 101.10 millimeters and gave me somewhat of an accurate idea of moving to each hole without having to do a lot of adjustment. I used easel to make the pattern to drill the holes. I just put one hole at 0, 0 and use that one for each of the individual holes. I wasn't going to take a chance of trying to lay out the whole board and just let it go. I wanted to line up the bit with each hole and do each one separately. I knew it was going to take longer, but it would be far more accurate this way. I'm using an M4 bolt for each of the holes in the T-track, and that requires a 3.2 millimeter hole for me to drill, so then I can later come back and tap each of the holes for the T-track. Yay, the first hole. So far so good, everything looks good. Now to go in and tap. I used a regular tap bit at first where I had to go back and forth. You drill forward and backwards little by little as you go down through the hole to be able to tap your hole so you can put a screw in. This did take a long time and was a little difficult with the drill. I tried to do it by hand, but I wasn't applying enough pressure, and using a drill actually made it a lot easier. I was able to keep it accurate, and the weight of the drill helped with being able to have the bit go down each of the holes. I later found a spiral tap bit where I could just drill, just like a regular drill bit, into each of the holes and tap each of them. It was a lot easier. I didn't have to keep going in forward and reverse with the drill bit and was able to get them all done pretty quickly. I did use oil each time I used the drill bit to make sure that it didn't break. At this point, I had drilled as much as I possibly can with the CNC that where it would reach in this orientation as it would be when it is finished. So I had to actually unhook each of the aluminum plates and flip them upside down. So I kept it aligned, like the right hand side aligned with the fence of the CNC, and it was flipped upside down so I can drill new holes in the front of the aluminum. With the panel end upside down, I got bold and wanted to make sure that all the holes were accurate, so I attached the T-track to the aluminum plate and lined up the bit with the holes in the T-track to drill right with the T-track attached. I was really worried. The first one that I did, I stood about 10 feet away and pressed go, but it ended up working just fine. To attach the 1/2-inch plywood strips, I am just using low tack tape, and I'm using the CA glue and tape trick so I can double tape them down. The low tack has a lot of surface area because it's thicker than my blue painter's tape and it's thinner. Later I will be adding in some spots for tiling as well as some threaded inserts to hold each of these boards in place. I'm not worried about it right now. This is how I did it last time and didn't have any issues with the tape. Thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Please like and subscribe.